The history of Anglicanism is intertwined with English and British history. To understand Anglicanism today, it is necessary to understand the beginnings of Anglicanism right back to when Christianity was introduced into what is now Britain. My goal of this video series is to give you, the viewer, a historical background on Anglicanism. Christianity first came to Britain in the 1st or 2nd century. At the time, Britain was populated by the Celts, but was part of the Roman Empire. The ancient Christian authors Tertullian and Origen both write of the Church in Britain. We know that at the Council of Arles held in 314, which was called to deal with the heresy of Donatism, it was attended by 3 bishops from present-day England, including Restitucius, the Archbishop of Londinium. Before the reign of Constantine, Christianity was a persecuted faith in Britain as elsewhere in the Roman Empire, and thus British Christians faced persecution for their faith like Christians elsewhere in the empire. The first British-born martyr is believed to be Saint Alban. Legend has it that Alban sheltered a priest whom converted and baptized him. When the Roman soldiers came for the priest, he exchanged cloaks with him and was taken in his place. The authorities, furious with the deception, had Alban decapitated on top of a hill as a sacrifice to the Roman gods. The present-day St. Alban's Cathedral was constructed on the reputed spot of his martyrdom in the city that is named for him. Historians remain divided on when he was martyred, with some believing this occurred as early as 209 and some as late as 304. He is still regarded as the proto-martyr, or first martyr of Britain. The person credited for the conversion of the Irish to Christianity is St. Patrick. St. Patrick was a Roman Briton born in about 390. He was originally captured and taken as a slave to Ireland for several years until he escaped back to Britain. In 432, Patrick, now a bishop, was sent by Pope Celestine I to convert the Irish. St. Patrick was largely successful, having converted many local leaders whom in turn evangelized for him. He also had a unique style of evangelizing, such as using a shamrock to explain the Trinity. His work left him the title Patrick, Apostle of Ireland. In 410, the Roman Empire withdrew the last of their legions from Britain. This was done, allowing the Angles, Saxons, and other pagan Germanic tribes to invade Britain and displace the Celts. The Celts remained in modern-day Cornwall and Wales, where Christianity still flourished. However, present-day England remained largely pagan. The Christianity that was active in these areas still held by the Celts was quite different from that than the Christianity practiced in continental Europe. Celtic Christianity was centered on monasteries, and its leaders were largely the abbots of these monasteries. While bishops certainly existed, the bishops and their dioceses had much less power than was the norm on the continent. As well, the Christians in Britain and Ireland were not truly under papal authority. One example of an abbot and bishop during this time is St. David of Wales. The monks under St. David did not use animals to plow their fields, and lived a simple life without possessions. He taught his followers to abstain from eating meat and to avoid drinking beer. He himself consumed mainly water and bread. Christianity is believed to have been introduced in Scotland in the 2nd century, but it was not the dominant religion. At this time, the Picts, not the Scots, were the dominant Celtic tribe, and the Scots were now what is the north of Ireland. The conversion of the southern Picts is credited to Saint Ninian in the 4th and 5th centuries. The conversion of the north of Scotland is credited to Saint Columba, who was originally much more influential in the Irish Church. Columba came to Scotland in 563, having left Ireland in a dispute with another church figure. He then established missions on the islands of the west of Scotland and made missions to the Pictish kings in the north. The tribes that had invaded Britain, such as the Angles and Saxons, remained in control of what is now England, and there was no successful attempt to convert them to Christianity. This all started to change in the late 6th century. King Ethelbert of Kent, whom was a pagan, married Bertha, the daughter of a Christian Frankish king. In 595, Pope Gregory I drew up plans for a mission to convert the Anglo-Saxon population. Gregory chose a Roman prior by the name of Augustine to head the mission and establish a church hierarchy which would be under papal authority. In 597, Augustine reached Abelbert's capital of Canterbury. Abelbert, who was converted to Christianity by this mission, allowed Augustine's priests to preach and convert freely. Thus, the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons began. For reasons still debated, Augustine established Canterbury as its archiepiscopal see. Some writings have suggested that Pope Gregory wanted Augustine in London, but the Saxons there were less open to the missionaries, while Canterbury would have offered more safety. He ordained a number of other bishops to be his suffragans. However, Augustine failed to bring the Celtic bishops elsewhere in Britain under his authority, which had also been a goal of Pope Gregory. One of the works that Augustine brought with him to England was a book written by Pope Gregory, commonly referred to as Curia Pastoralis, or Pastoral Care. The book was a how-to guide by which Pope Gregory felt that priests could properly tend for those under their care. This book was taken much to heart by the English Church and remained the guide for how to conduct pastoral duties for many centuries. One of the sees founded under Augustine's overall authority was York in 626. York is unique in the history of the Roman Empire, as 3 Roman emperors held court there. York was eventually raised to archiepiscopal status in 735 with metropolitical authority over the north of England. To this day, the northern third of England remains under the oversight of the Archbishop of York. One of the most contentious issues that faced Christianity in the 4th century was the date on which Easter, that is, the resurrection of the Lord, was celebrated. Eventually, the early Christians agreed on a scheme that at a time would involve a complicated series of calculations that were simplified using a series of tables. Unfortunately, the tables used by the Celtic Christians were outdated and highly inaccurate. Those Christians in Britain under Roman authority were celebrating Easter at a different time than were the Celtic Christians. Over a period of time, the Celts were persuaded that, yes, they were wrong and the rest of Christendom was right. One of the last areas to correct itself was Northumbria. In 664, King Oswu called a synod at Whitby to put an end to the matter of the fact that his subjects were celebrating Easter on different dates. The side supporting the Roman calculation method won out. Even as most of the Anglo-Saxon population was converted to Christianity, another set of invaders set their sights on England. These were the Vikings, most of them from modern Denmark. In 896, Edmund, then the king of East Anglia, was martyred, either during or shortly after battle with the Danes. There are differing accounts on his martyrdom. However, the legends of his death say he was killed for refusing to renounce Christ or place his kingdom in vassalage to the pagan Danes, and he fell to a myriad of arrows. He remains one of the most important English saints. Over the years, the various smaller Anglo-Saxon kingdoms began to merge into the Kingdom of England. In 1042, Edward the Confessor came to the throne of England and was the last undisputed Saxon king of England. He was responsible for the founding of a monastery upstream of the Thames River from London. The abbey church was dedicated to St. Peter and is today commonly called Westminster Abbey. In 1066, King Edward died. At the time, the English church was under interdict due to disagreements with then Archbishop Stigand of Canterbury and the Pope in Rome. William, Duke of Normandy, claimed the English throne and defeated his Saxon rival Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings. William seized the crown and was to be known in history as William the Conqueror. The lasting effect on the English church was that its native Anglo-Saxon bishops were supplanted by ones from Normandy or Italy. Archbishop Stigand was formally replaced by Lanfranc in 1070. The next year, a dispute rose between Lanfranc and the Archbishop-elect of York, Thomas. Lanfranc believed that he should have primacy over York, and the matter was referred to the papacy in Rome, which sided with Lanfranc in Canterbury. However, just a few decades later, this decision was reversed. In 1352, the arrangement was altered for the last time, when the Archbishop of Canterbury was granted the title Primate of all England, while the Archbishop of York was given the title Primate of England, which has survived to this day. In 1093, an Italian monk by the name of Anselm was installed as the new Archbishop of Canterbury. Anselm's episcopate is notable in that he was exiled from England twice. However, his theological works and positions are more important to Western Christianity. Anselm is considered by many to be the first scholastic philosopher of Christian theology. He was a follower of the works of Augustine of Hippo and Neoplatonism. Among his notable works are his ontological argument for the existence of God and for his definition of satisfaction atonement. He is listed among the Doctors of the Church in Roman Catholicism. In 1162, Thomas Becket became Archbishop of Canterbury. King Henry II had nominated his good friend and Chancellor to the position, as he wanted to gain greater control of both church and state in England. One of his primary goals was for the secular courts to have authority to try clergy who were under ecclesiastical courts and not those under royal authority. King Henry had hoped by nominating someone under his influence to the post of Archbishop, this could be accomplished. After rising to the position, Becket's allegiances changed, and he held firm the church's position. In 1170, Becket was killed by a group of knights loyal to the king. According to legend, the knights had overheard the king say, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" The knights, thinking they were carrying out the king's wishes, killed the archbishop during evening vespers in his own cathedral. It is very likely you have heard of King John, who is integral with the legends of Robin Hood. In 1207, when John was king in his own right, a dispute between John and the papacy arose over the election of a new Archbishop of Canterbury. Disputes involving new archbishops were a common thing. However, John was not an effective king nor negotiator. The dispute resulted in John seizing church property, and the Pope excommunicated him as a response, and later placed the English Church under interdict. The parish churches were unable to conduct services for a time until John finally acquiesced in 1213. However, John continued to have issues ruling his kingdom. In 1215, while facing rebellion from his own nobles, John was forced to agree to the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. This charter, which started the principle of constitutional government in England, also formally established the freedom of the Church at the beginning of the document. First, we have granted to God, and by this our present charter have confirmed, for us and our heirs, forever, that the Church of England shall be free, and shall have her whole rights and liberties inviolable. After this period of history, the first English parliaments began to meet, as was guaranteed in the Magna Carta. The Church was represented by the bishops and abbots, known as the Lords Spiritual. Together with the nobles, or Lords Temporal, they made up the chamber called the House of Lords, which still stands today as the upper house of Parliament in the United Kingdom. During the latter half of the 14th century, a pre-Reformation religious movement occurred in England. The radical theologian John Wycliffe had begun to question a number of the Church's doctrines. Wycliffe and his contemporaries, today called the Lollards, believed that the Catholic Church to be corrupt and relied on Scripture alone as a source of doctrine. Wycliffe was also the first to translate the Bible into English from the Latin Vulgate. However, the Lollards were never truly united in their beliefs, and they faded away after Wycliffe's death in 1384. He was declared a heretic 31 years later in 1415, and in 1428 his body was exhumed and burnt at the stake in a posthumous execution. Many of Wycliffe's positions and views on the Church ended up resurfacing over 130 years after his death in such leaders of the Reformation as Martin Luther, John Calvin, Hilderic Zwingli, and Thomas Cranmer. England entered a period of perpetual civil wars from 1455 to 1485. Two branches of the ruling Plantagenet House, the Yorks and Lancasters, fought continuously for the crown of England. The wars finally ended when Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian claimant, defeated King Richard III, a Yorkist, at the Battle of Bosworth Field. As a way to finally end the wars and strengthen his own claim to the throne, Henry Tudor married Elizabeth, niece of King Richard III. He would reign as King Henry VII. However, there were several other claimants to the throne which could bring down the Tudor dynasty and plunge England back into civil war. In my next video, I'll be covering the reign of King Henry VIII and the beginning of the Reformation in England. So please rate, please comment respectfully, and please subscribe. And thanks for watching.